Washington Square News is a weekly student newspaper at New York University with a readership of about 65,000. They usually report on a range of stories, including protests near NYU, adjunct unionization, and research done by professors. In the first few months of this year, they reported on a string of assaults against Asian students on campus.
Our coverage basically showed how campus safety dismissed a lot of the students who were coming forward about being assaulted on campus. Eventually, they finally decided to install cameras and new lighting out by Stern where the attacks are taking place. It just shows how a lot of times things are kept under wraps unless student journalism is there to be the light and to show what's actually happening.
But this last October, the reporters at WSN had to hold someone else accountable, the New York Times.
Someone sent the Maitland Jones article in our Slack group chat, and I read it and I was just instantly pissed off.
The story Roscoe is talking about was written by longtime New York Times reporter Stephanie Saul. The article focused on how Maitland Jones, an organic chemistry professor, was fired after 82 of his 350 students signed a petition against him. The article said students felt Jones's grading was unfair and that he was not accommodating. They asked the administration for additional help with their grades, but the university fired him instead. Saul wrote, "This one unhappy chemistry class could be a case study of the pressures on higher education as it tries to handle its Gen Z student body."
It just read as an opinion piece. And, as someone who came into journalism writing opinion pieces, I know what an opinion piece looks like, and I know what shouldn't be an opinion piece. And that piece was marketed as news. There was only, one student in the entire piece, and the student that they chose to have a perspective transferred to Brown. That doesn't seem like a good source to me.
It seemed, from an objective standpoint, not to be covering equally both sides of the story. It seemed heavily favored into Professor Jones, Maitland Jones' favor. So it didn't make sense to me.
Editor-in-chief Arnav Binaikia started working on a list of things the New York Times got wrong in the article and compiling new student interviews that showed a different story.
He came over to our little opinion desk and he said, "Listen, I want you to have all of these points that I think we should address in the editorial. Can you draft that up?" And I said, "Sure." After that, until around 4 a.m., we were moving things around, rewriting. So we were walking around on the desks, on top, just being how do we organize this piece? Because it was just a behemoth of a thing.
The editorial got 15,000 views in about 48 hours. Students felt accurately represented too.
There's this meme that someone made. I want to print it out and hang it on my wall and frame it because it just made me so happy. I laugh at it every time I think of it. And people in the comments of that Instagram post were like, "Yeah, you go Washington Square News editorial board. You guys are my heroes." That felt so good.
Journalism is very important because you're being objective, but at the same time, you still have a lot of power. So a lot of times our coverage focuses a lot on what the administration does that's wrong and how they can improve, from the student's perspective.
Cohen says student papers have access to people and places that the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal don't.
It's funny because we don't have the same resources that they do, yet we cover more, I'd say, stories that they can't even cover themselves properly. We live here at NYU, we have the eyes on the administration at all times, and we also live in the neighborhood and could see things happening here that other publications can't, just because they are in their own newsrooms across the city. People here want to cover NYU and want to do journalism, and so I think that's an important part, and that's kind of what makes the community here, is that people are not in it for the money and not in it for that being here, they're in it to tell stories.